Arredondo.
Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I love the energy. I've had a chance to talk with a few different teachers and administrators while I've been here, and I'm really excited about the takeaways, things that you're learning and you're ready to implement them. And now we have this little break where we get to process everything, right? So let's get started with looking beyond the hardware and thinking about what it is that is going to connect all the pieces when we get back to our sites. So I grew up in East Los Angeles, in the barrio, in Boyle Heights, where everyone was just like me. I didn't know that I was poor. Everyone spoke Spanish. We were innovative. If you see my swing, it was made out of a rope with a pillow. So see, we started the homemaker movement way back then. And I was proud of my culture. I'm Mexican. I danced folklorico. I was really into the entire culture, the way of being. I embraced it. I loved it. This is where we did our shopping, the mercadito. It's the only place where you could buy the snakeskin boots and the ingredients to tamales all in one place. But this was my world. This was normal to me because, again, everyone around me looked just like me. But now when you have parents like this, everything can't be sunshines and rainbows. See, my dad was the leader of a gang in East LA. And so there were many times when I heard gunshots outside and I wondered, were those pointed towards my dad? There were many times when we were walking to school and we would see drug deals happen. There were many times when I was coming home from school and there were fights right on the corner of my block. And so we started to think about, wow, what is my community doing for me? And how are my parents helping me through this? Well, they really couldn't. My dad had no idea how to function as a normal person in society. And some families, they go visiting colleges, right, trying to get a feel. We went visiting prisons. There's something wrong with that picture. I shouldn't know where every prison is up and down California. That's just not something I should have. And so what was the saving grace? It was teachers. It was school. My elementary school figured out how to shut all of that around, how to shut it out. How when you stepped foot there, you were challenged and you were empowered and you forgot what was happening around you. And teachers made you believe that you were better than what you were living in and that you had a chance of getting out of this, and it wasn't a death sentence to live there. Teachers did that. And one teacher in particular, Miss Hirschkoff, my 5th grade teacher, worked closely with my parents because she saw something in me. She's like, this little girl needs to do something more. So she did a home visit. Can you imagine being 10 years old, you're playing dress up with your sister, and all of a sudden your teacher shows up? Awkward. But there she was, talking to my mom, saying, you need to put her on a school bus because she needs to go to school on the other side of town. And if you know LA, 20 miles takes an hour and a half, right? But 20 miles down the way would change my life trajectory. And I didn't know that at the time. My mom was like, I don't know, that's far. Getting on a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're not getting back until probably about 5:30 at night. She's only in 6th grade. And my teacher said, no, you have to do it. She has to go on that school bus, she's ready. See, because the middle schools in my neighborhood were gang infested. They had a huge teacher turnover. People didn't want to work there. And there was no support. There were no after-school programs. So what else did kids have to do but run the street? There was nothing for them. So after many conversations, we applied and I was on a school bus. And see, I thought that this new experience, I knew it'd be a challenge. but I didn't know exactly what I was facing. So I'm on this school bus, and if you notice, my house is the one with the boards on the windows. That was our one-bedroom little shack. All of a sudden, I'm driving through neighborhoods with manicured lawns, two-story houses. It's like, wow, this is a movie set. People don't really live like this. It was really crazy. But when I got to school, I didn't feel the animosity. I didn't feel like I didn't belong when I worked with students. But I did feel that from some adults. See, because the part that I didn't know when I got on that school bus was that my school district had lost a lawsuit, and they were forced to integrate schools. And so they took all of the poor kids from one neighborhood, put them on buses, and shipped them out to the schools in the rich areas. So there were a lot of people who were not happy about that. But what fault was it of mine that policymakers thought that that was the solution to the inequity of schools? I was just a kid. And what fault was it of mine that my mom was trying to do everything she possibly could, but we were still poor? I was just a kid. And what fault was it of mine that I was trying to be the best student I could, but teachers were standing in the way? I was just a kid. See, some teachers had a very different perception of why I was there or whether I deserved to be there. And their messages came in different ways. For example, we had a science fair project and a teacher said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to do that. It's probably too much work. Or you probably can't afford to buy all of the posters and things." It's like, wow, okay. Why did she have a lower expectation of me just because I didn't live in that same community? Just because I didn't look like everybody else? Or when I scored higher than everybody on the test and teachers would say, "Oh, did somebody give you the answers?" What? No, I studied. And it was things like that that kept happening while I was there. And again, I don't think that this was intentional. I don't think that they meant to do that. And I don't think that they realized exactly how impressionable I was. See, because in middle school, you're still trying to figure out who you are. You're still trying to figure out, where do you fit? And so one day, their message was loud and clear. We were on a field trip to go see some tide pools. We passed by Pepperdine University. I had never seen it before. I was in awe. I was like, wow, what is that? And the teacher said, "Oh, that's Pepperdine University." I was like, oh, I definitely have to go there. I pictured myself with the wind blowing in my hair. I was like, oh, we're gonna sit outside and we're gonna study, and then when I need a break, I'm gonna go down to the beach and surf, because that's what all Californians do, right? You surf. And all of a sudden, my daydream is halted, like a car crash. Kids like you, they don't go to Pepperdine University. What? Kids like me? Ah, that's right. He knows who my dad is. He's met my parents. He knows I ride a school bus. Kids like me. And that stuck with me. And from that point on, I didn't know what kids like me was going to mean. I didn't know what I wanted it to mean for myself. And so what it did to me is I disconnected. I disconnected from my culture. I disconnected from everything that had to do with being Mexican. I stopped speaking Spanish altogether. I refused to identify that I was Mexican. I claimed I was American and only American, and never spoke anything about my culture to anyone. And I became ashamed. I became the kid that withdrew and was just trying to hide because I didn't know where I fit. I wanted so bad to be at Pepperdine University. I wanted so bad to be that good student, but I didn't know how to do it within the system that I found myself in. And so I'm going to show you a little video. And when you watch this, I want you to think about, how does this play out in schools? And again, it's not intentional. It's something that we don't always are aware of, but I want you to pay attention to this. This is called the bear that wasn't.
Once upon a time, in fact it was on a Tuesday, the bear saw that it was time to go into a cave and hibernate, and that was just what he did. Not long afterward, in fact it was on a Wednesday, lots of workers arrived near that cave. While the bear slept, they built a great, huge factory. As winter turned to spring, the bear awoke and stepped out of his cave. His eyes popped. Where was the forest? Where was the grass? Where were the trees? Where were the flowers? What had happened? "I must be dreaming," he said. "Of course I'm dreaming." But it wasn't a dream. It was real. Just then, the foreman came out of the factory. "Hey, you! Get back to work," he said. The bear replied, "I don't work here. I'm a bear." The foreman laughed. "That's a fine excuse for a man to keep from doing any work, saying he's a bear." The bear said, "But I am a bear." The foreman stopped laughing. He was very mad. "Don't try to fool me," he said. "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the general manager." The general manager also insisted the bear was a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. The bear said, "No, you're mistaken. I am a bear." The general manager was very mad too. The bear said, "I'm sorry to hear you say that. You see, I am a bear." The third vice president was even madder. The second vice president was more than mad or madder. He was furious. The first vice president yelled in rage. He said, "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the president." The bear pleaded, "This is a dreadful error, you know, because ever since I can remember, I've always been a bear." And that's exactly what the bear told the president. "Thank you for telling me," the president said. "You can't be a bear. Bears are only in a zoo or a circus. They're never inside a factory, and that's where you are, inside a factory. So how can you be a bear?" The bear said, "But I am a bear." The president said, "Not only are you a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat, but you are also very stubborn. So I'm going to prove it to you once and for all that you are not a bear." The bear said, "But I am a bear." The president packed his vice presidents and the bear into a car and they drove to the zoo. Bears at the zoo said the bear was not a bear because if he were a bear, he would be inside a cage. The bear said, "But I am a bear." So they all left the zoo and they drove to the nearest circus. "Is he a bear?" the president asked the circus bears. The bear said no. If he were a bear, he would be wearing a little hat with a striped ribbon, holding onto a balloon and riding a bicycle. The bear said, "But I am a bear." When the president and his vice presidents returned to the factory, they put the bear to work on a big machine with lots of other men. The bear worked on the big machine for many, many months. After a long, long time, the factory closed and all the workers went away. The bear was the last one left. And as he left the shut-down factory, he saw geese flying south and leaves falling from the trees. Winter was coming, he thought. It was time to hibernate. He found a cave and was about to enter when he stopped. "I can't go in a cave. I'm not a bear. I'm a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat." As the days grew colder and the snow fell, the bear sat shivering with cold. I wish I were a bear," he thought. Then suddenly he got up, walked through the deep snow toward the cave. Inside it was cozy and snug. The icy wind and the cold, cold snow couldn't reach him there. He felt warm all over. He sank down on a bed of pine boughs, and soon he was happily asleep and dreaming sweet dreams, just like all bears do when they hibernate. So even though the foreman and the general manager and the third vice president and the second vice president and the first vice president and the president and the zoo bears and the circus bears had said he was a silly man who needed a shave and wore a fur coat, I don't think he really believed it. Do you? No, indeed, he knew he wasn't a silly man, and he wasn't a silly bear either. So
I became the bear that wasn't. I was trying to figure out, all these people are telling me, no, you're not the college-bound student. You are the daughter of a gangster. You are just a poor immigrant. That is who you are, and that is where you stay. And I got those messages. But at the same time, I knew that deep down I could do it and I could make it. And I had other teachers telling me, you need to keep trying. And even though it feels like you're 10 steps behind, you need to keep pushing. But I didn't know how to navigate that. I was just a kid. And so I bounced around to quite a few different middle schools. And I was that kid in your class that was never absent and drove you absolutely bananas, that made you question why you even got into education in the first place. I was that kid. I was the kid who you could have sworn it's better and easier to work at a grocery store in the produce section, because when they're rotten, you throw them out. I was that kid. And I remember every single teacher that stood up for me. I remember every single teacher that tried. And I remember every single teacher that didn't. And at that time, I acted like I didn't care. I acted like I wasn't listening, but I was. And we are. And so in those moments where you are at your wit's end, you have to remember they're watching. They're listening, and they're paying attention, even though they act like they're not. And so it took quite some time for me to realize what I was going to do. I went to high school still kind of not sure whether I was going to pursue college, where I wanted to be, who I wanted to be. I still was not going to identify myself with the Latino culture in any way, shape, or form. If you notice, my hair is very, very light. And when I went to high school, I found myself stuck again in this parallel universe. See, I got into the magnet program, but then there was the regular program. So who decides the fate of students when some are college-bound, but the others are not, and yet you're still all from the same community? It becomes the haves and the have-nots. And so in my senior year, I wanted to take an AP Lit class. And the teacher, she's like, oh, you can't take my class, because she thought I had a problem with authority. I was like, yeah, maybe, kind of. I'm working on it, though, still. And she's like, no, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and you're not going to get everything you want. And so she was the only teacher who taught AP Lit for magnet students. So I had to take it with regular school. The magnet rejects is what we were in that class. And I was like, fine. So I go to my class, and there's 40 students in there. Magnet school class, 24. I was like, why do we have 40 kids in here? And then I was like, okay, so where are all the AP books, all the resources? And the teacher laughed. She's like, oh, did you think that they wanted you to take this class so you could pass that test? She's like, no. She's like, they're offering you this class to say they gave it to you, but they don't actually expect you to pass the test. I was like, what? But my magnet friends had 5, 6, 7 different resource books. They were doing study groups. They were going to make sure that they passed the AP exam. And she was like, yeah, they're expected to pass. I was like, this just doesn't make sense to me. So being the one problem with authority, I walked into the magnet office and I said, there are 10 magnet students in that class. I want 10 copies of every resource that magnet students have, because we are magnet students and we deserve those same resources. They kind of looked at me sideways like, who's this little girl coming in here? I was like, yeah, I want 10 copies. I figured we could share. We could make it work. So they go behind in an office, they talk, and they're like, how many kids do you have? 40. They go back in, they come back out. They're like, we'll give you a copy for everybody. So we get a copy for every single student in my class. And that small victory was something that I learned tremendously about. Because what I learned was that students like me needed an advocate. That students like me needed someone who was going to fight for them. And that someone was going to be me. And I had already been thinking of going into college, but now I knew exactly why. And it was because I needed to become a teacher. I needed to be the person who was going to fight for those little victories, for those little things that were going to make a difference. And so, which college was I going to go to? Pepperdine University. I had to go. But when I first applied, I didn't get in. I waitlisted, which was devastating. But I went to community college and I called them every single day, almost. And so I think they finally let me in because they're like, oh my God, she's blowing up her phones. Just let her in. So I finally got to go to Pepperdine, and I thought getting in was really hard. Oh no, getting out is even tougher. I was like, oh, man, that was hard. See, because my version of prepared, my school district's version of prepared, was not the same version of prepared as everybody else. Because now I was going to school with people from all over the country, from different countries. And here I was thinking that I graduated close to the top of my class, and that was good enough, and it wasn't. So I lived in tutoring labs. I lived in making sure that I studied and study groups and staying up late and doing all of this stuff to make sure that I stayed even with everybody, that I could compete. And when I had to have 3 jobs just to be able to make it through college, professors saw that. And even though the majority of classes at Pepperdine are in the daytime, because they don't expect their students to work, I had to. And my professors didn't make it any easier for me in terms of curriculum, but they did accommodate. And they would meet with me later in the evening. They would meet with me on a Saturday. They would meet with me outside of class to make sure that I had everything that I needed, because they saw that I was trying to help myself. And that's what I try to teach my kids. When you're willing to help yourself, people are willing to help you too. And everybody needs help along the way. I didn't get to be where I am because I did it alone. None of us are where we are because we did it alone. And that's what we need to communicate to our kids. They need to see that it's okay to reach out. As long as you are willing to help yourself, it's not for them to do the work for you, but it's for them to help you see other options, see other paths. And so because at Pepperdine there's a big mission on community and service and giving back, I knew exactly where I had to go. And that was back to my middle school. And so San Fernando Middle School is where it all began. And I went back to teach. And I didn't go back thinking that, oh, I'm going to be the principal one day, or oh, I'm going to start my own school. No. I used to say, just give me students. I'll teach outside. I don't even need a class. But when I started to work here, then I really started to see more of the inequity. We had 2,400 students. That's a lot of kids. We were low performing. Kids were getting lost in the shuffle. We had trash can fires, lunchtimes that would get cut to like 10 minutes. We had one gang going out one gate, another gang going out from another. There were so many things happening. How did you manage all of those things? And we could have just sat back and blamed this and that and the bureaucracy and everything else. Or we come together and try to figure out a solution. And so that's what we did. We broke up 2,400 students into small learning academies, each with a different focus. Visual performing arts, law and justice, science and medicine. I ran the Multimedia Academy. And as a new teacher, 3 years in, I was like, what on earth do I know about running a multimedia academy? Nothing. But it didn't matter because it wasn't about me. See, because when our kids come to us, they can't wait for us to figure it out. We can't look at parents and say, oh, well, your kids are here now, but give me 2 more years and then I'll figure it out and then it'll be a good education. We can't do that. We have to figure it out as we go, and it's hard. But that's why we have to work together. And so we did the Multimedia Academy for 3 years, and it was working. We started to see progress. It still wasn't good enough. And so our school district came up with public school choice. And what they did is they took the lowest performing schools and allowed anybody to write a plan to take them over, to make them better. And so as teachers, we're like, oh yeah, here's our chance. We're gonna write our own plan to create our dream school. And that's exactly what we did. We joined forces with Youth Policy Institute because we knew that we needed those wraparound services, the social workers, the counselors, the job training for parents, the workshops, all those other pieces. Because remember, we're combating poverty and the effects of poverty. We're not just talking academics anymore. And so as teachers, we wrote our plan, it got approved, and we got our letter, yes, we're opening in 3 months. All right, 3 months. We don't even have letterhead. It's like, that's all those little things you don't even think about. Letterhead. So where do you start? Well, we had to identify our priority areas. We knew we wanted a strong instructional program. We knew we wanted a positive school culture. And we knew we needed parent engagement. And so once we identified those, we knew that those 3 things had to work in tandem. But we had to pick one to really focus our attention on. And so that had to be school culture. See, because if kids come to your school and they're not ready, they're not in the right mindset to learn, it doesn't matter how beautiful your lesson plan is, it's just not gonna happen. If you don't build those relationships with kids, if you don't get to know them and them get to know you, it doesn't matter how great of a teacher you are, they're going to shut you out. And so we needed to create a way of making sure that all of our kids had the same messaging, that they got the same feeling, that they had the same curriculum. So we created advisory. And in advisory, we worked on those social, emotional components. We worked on not only the academic piece and how do they get along with each other, but what happens on the outside? What happened over the weekend? How did you make it through the weekend? Some of our kids go through things that are imaginable, and yet they're supposed to come on Monday fully refreshed and ready to learn when they're still trying to get over what happened that morning. And so I'm going to show you a little video clip of what our advisory program looked like.
The benefits of advisory is that your teacher gets to know you and you create a bond.
In the 60 one, we have to work together, solve the problem, and we cannot let go of our arms, and we have to try to move, be in a circle.
My favorite part about advisory is when we have game day on Fridays.
We socialize, that way all of us students get to know each other and make more friends. That way bullying is less frequent.
When we go to advisory, it's a period that we all get together and get to know each other and play activities, but also learn stuff at the same time.
I do many things in this class, like we do this notebook where we say what bad thing happened over our weekend or what good thing. I express myself by being nice to my friends and family, and that's what Miss Berdin taught me to do.
Another reason why I like advisory is because the way Mr. Marquez treats us in here.
How does he treat you?
He treats us like if we're his kids, and he cares about us. It's like a family in here.
And so this idea of family is something that we knew we had to foster. And so now we're 6 years old, and our advisory program has changed. We're still including all of these pieces, but now we had to add the college career readiness. We had to add that communication and leadership piece. So now our students, they have 2 of them from each class every week. They learn the lesson, how to facilitate it, and on Fridays they lead advisory. And so now they're starting to learn how do you get a group to listen? How do you command attention? And how do you prepare? And so it's all of those little pieces that are now starting to be embedded into our advisory program because it was needed. And once this was starting to take shape, you could see the dynamic. We were able to see students now ready to learn. We didn't have all the discipline issues that we used to have before. You could see the relationships between themselves and between staff, and it felt like a family. And so then that led us to our next component, was parent engagement. Because everything that we were doing at school had to trickle down and go into homes. It wasn't enough for it to just stay at school. We had to get parents on board with what we were doing. We had to figure out, how do we teach them? See, parents are not the enemy. They're not the ones who are saying, oh, well, I don't want my kid to be successful. They do. But what are we doing to show them how to navigate our system, especially when they're not from this country? And so we went from hosting large auditoriums or cafeterias, talking at our parents, telling them this is what it needs to be. Then we were like, wait, that's not really working. Okay, let's bring it into a classroom. Let's have a teacher talking to them, and maybe that's going to be a little bit better. No, that wasn't working either. So this is what it looks like now. What better way to show them how to help their kids than to show them exactly how to do some of the projects that their kids are working on? Their children get to walk them through and explain, this is what I'm learning, this is how we do it. And it empowers them. Because now when they don't see these things, they come and ask, they're like, wait a minute, shouldn't they have a project right now? You're right. And they become advocates for their children. And that's what we want. We want them to learn what the educational system looks like and be able to navigate it so that they can help their children get through that path and get to college successfully. And so we make sure that we host all these workshops in Spanish because the majority of our students and their parents, that's what they speak. So we have to make sure that we're catering to them and to our families. So here's a little video of what our parent nights look like. And so when you empower parents, then you bring in the fun stuff like Zumba, and then you tie it to a nutrition workshop so then they all come, right? And so we have to find ways of making it engaging to parents, not only to students. And so like you saw, we do train our parents in how to use the devices because we do have a one-to-one program where iPads go home. But the reality is, you know, and it's humbling to have to say our one-to-one program isn't working. It's not. We've been running it for the last 4 years. Students at every grade level get their own iPad. They take it home. They bring it to school. We were expecting these astronomical gains. They're going to go home and they're going to study and they're going to be researching and they're going to be practicing and they're going to, no. Hasn't quite worked out that way. And so what do? Do we continue to keep sending them home just because the cool thing right now is a one-to-one device and let's do that? Or do we take a look at our data? Do we take a look at what it is that we're trying to do and look at the people and say, what do these people need? What do the students need? What do the families need? Why isn't it working the way we thought? Oh, because they don't have Wi-Fi. Oh, because they can't afford that monthly Wi-Fi. That's a problem. And that's a problem that as a school, we cannot fix. We can't combat that yet. And I've been in conversations with our school district of ways of amplifying our signal. If every single school amplified their signal so that the local community could tap into that Wi-Fi, how would that change education? How can we provide that for families for free? That should be a non-negotiable. They should be able to have it. But we're not there yet. So what are we doing next year with our one-to-one device? We're taking them and making classroom sets so that every single teacher now has their own cart in their room where they don't have to share. That way they get to use it from the very beginning to the very end and don't have to rotate around, because that's hard. It's really hard to plan your lessons around you only get a cart once a week. And if we want teachers to be innovative and we want them to take risks, then we need to provide what they need. We have to. So with these one-to-one carts, we're going to set up another one where students can check them out. If they're working on a specific project, they need it for a week, they need it for 2, they'll be able to have that ability. But it won't be the one-to-one going home anymore. And so our next piece was a strong instructional program. And I know it sounds like, oh, this is coming after the fact, but it's really not. And we needed to not only engage students, but activate them. Because for so many years, they were just sitting back and listening to a teacher talk and give them everything, and now we needed them to be the ones looking for information. We needed them to be the ones creating. So how did we do that? Well, project-based learning. It's the only way, right? That's why everyone's here. 21st century skills, the 4 C's plus the T. They had to have real-world application, hands-on learning, and that authentic audience. And all of those pieces are so much more critical in areas of poverty. Because see, you have to teach students to be empowered, to change their life trajectory, to change their own communities. And we have to explicitly teach them how to do that. We have to teach them how to collaborate and work together. And yes, do we have devices? But that again, that comes second. Because devices don't replace good teaching. There is no app for that. It's teachers that make all the difference. And so here's a project that I want to show you that students made. And again, these projects, we don't have every type of equipment possible. We have iPads and a couple laptops. And so here's a video that they made for the community, a public service announcement.
Hi, how can I help you? Welcome.
I need a new look.
Great, follow me. So, how was your day?
Babe, what do you want for lunch?
I think I should get Chinese food, or unos tacos de asada, or carne asada, with beans. Nada más quiero unos tamales de pollo.
Finally. Oh no, we ran out of water.
Oh!
California is in a severe drought, and we don't know how many years it will last. Both residents and businesses need to conserve water.
And so we think about when we want to activate and engage students, we want to teach them about environmental issues. How do you advocate? How do you make sure that you're spreading a positive message? How do you use media in a positive way? It's through projects like this, and it doesn't take a whole lot of hardware. It just takes a little bit of effort and some passion. And so we're always trying to refine. We're always trying to figure out how do we make it better next year. And these are all the different resources that we have to tap into. We have to tap into the nonprofit organizations because they have to help us. They provide all those other services that we just can't. And our teachers work really hard to figure out where are we right now, where do we want to be, and how do we bridge the gap in between? How do we keep taking steps forward? And again, through all of this, it's a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of time. And so with teachers, we have to have fun too, right? So SFIM superheroes, this is our staff at PD, and yes, that's me, swirly pearly, fully equipped, brain sprinkles and all. And it's because every one of us has different superpowers. We are all ordinary people with just extraordinary determination. And we, as a team, we bring in different effects. And as one, we create magic. And that's what it's about. It's inspiring teachers to continue because the work is so hard. And it feels like it's never done. And so we try to have as much fun as possible, just like the sharks today. And so next year, we are opening up our makerspace, where now our kids will have a place with a green screen and not just a sheet in the classroom. They'll actually have a space with lighting, with sound, so that they don't have traffic in the background of all of their videos, because that's where they shoot outside. Where they can actually build robots. We have a little bit of coding happening, we have a little bit of robotics, but now we will actually have a real station for it. And then the construction area where they can build their own models, their own prototypes, their own solar cookers, where they don't have to do it outside. And so I reached out, like every good educator, to every makerspace person, and I was like, come on, how do I do this? And they're like, you just do it, and it's probably gonna fail, but you just keep going. I was like, what? Wait, that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted a formula. I wanted step 1, step 2, step 3. They're like, no, that doesn't exist. Oh, all right. So we are jumping in head first. Whether sink or swim, we have to make it work for our kids because, again, they can't wait. They can't wait 2 years while I research it and make sure that we got all of these pieces together. They need it now because they're going on to high school and they need to be ready. And when they get there, they need to be ready for college. And so as you leave today, I want to remind you that I was that kid in your class who drove you absolutely bananas. I was that kid who questioned everything you did. And I was the kid that many people thought would never go to college, more or less meet the president, be on a TED Talk, or win Woman of the Year. Thank you. And it's up to us to find that little bit of hope in every single one of our kids so that they can one day be up here. See, I am a product of your efforts. I stand here as the principal of a school that I created, never dreaming that that would be possible, but it was because of people like you, every single day. And I continue to have success because of people like you, because I continue to reach out, to ask questions, to find out, how do I make this better? And it takes all of us, every single one of us, sharing and communicating our ideas because our kids are counting on us. And we have to remember that we are the cultivators of intellectual curiosity. We must empower our kids to ask questions when they don't understand, and to question when they do, and to make change because they can. And if every single one of us does our part, I know that our education system will be that much better. And so as you travel back home this evening, think about all the different pieces that you learned today and through the last couple of days, and all the different people you met, and how can you grow your network, your ideas. Because with all of us, we need to create more opportunity and change. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.